Welcome back to Community Conversations. I'm your host, Steve Mantis, and my guest today is City Councillor Brian McKinnon, representing the Red River Ward. Brian, so we were just talking about the interplay between, your responsibility to the folks that elect you in Red River and the whole city. There's so many things, it seems like, as a councillor, you have to balance. You talked about a priority around roads and infrastructure, and it seems like that's where a lot of the budget comes into play.
Yep.
Another part, and I've talked to a number of the councillors about this, is how about the pieces that are softer in terms of city services that may go to kind of quality of life? How neighborhoods work with each other. And we've been involved a little bit cross paths about in the ward, the community action group in the Windsor, Picton, Blucher area. Now here's a little community group that's gotten going, and just by providing some programming for their kids, that's really their focus. They saw crime drop in the neighborhood 35% year over year.
Dramatically, absolutely.
So what can the city do? What can you do as a councillor in your ward, or the city as a whole? I don't know where this falls. Where can you do to promote that kind of activity that doesn't hardly cost anything? The city hasn't been putting a lot of money into that, or any money, but we've had a big impact in terms of reduction of crime, and that means a safer neighborhood, which is a more vibrant neighborhood.
Absolutely, and that's a good example, is the Windsor-Picton area. And I know initially I was involved with a couple of the people who were leading that. What's her name? King and Elena. And it's reflected again in over on Simpson Street with Linda Bruins and her whole that what she initiated over there.
That's right.
And you're right, it doesn't cost us a lot, but we can certainly lend through some of our social agencies that we obviously support. We can lend support to them. During all of that, of course, the Boys and Girls Club moved into the old school there. You remember when all that happened.
Yeah, my kids went to school when it was a school.
When Forest Park was there.
In Forest Park,
Yeah, and so that was just a boon to the neighborhood. And I remember I was sort of semi-involved in that. And moving that program there helped that whole Windsor-Picton area create their own initiatives. And so the city, overall supports anything that like a neighborhood will start. When you do have that kind of initiative, like Linda and Elena, and I know there's some of this happening in Westfort, Current River as well, up on the by Hudson and the North End,
right?
That whole area, they're doing the same thing, and I have always said to my constituents, if you can start something as a neighborhood, we'll support you either with in-kind material. I'll give you an example. The park beside the fire hall on Junot. That was a rundown. It was, well, I don't know if you remember, it was initially slated as the spot where the EMS building would go.
That's right, yeah.
So, okay, that's a whole other story, but they put the EMS building down the street, which is a great spot for it. So that's helping that whole area, by the way. Well, then the neighborhood, and I met with some of the neighbors, they said, what can we do to ensure this park becomes vibrant and, sustains itself? So they started a group, and we worked together on this group, and now they have raised their own money, and they are planting trees. People are donating memorial benches. They cleaned the whole area out. I think there's probably 40 or 50 trees that so that's the example. And the city is, they help plant, they do planting of the trees, they will cut the grass, all that kind of stuff. So that's the contribution from that end. and the Parks Division saying, yep, we'll do our bit. And so same thing with places like the Picton, Windsor area, and with Linda and her group. The city will do a lot of stuff in kind. I know the park has been fixed up at the end of Picton. It needs more, absolutely, but a little bit at a time, because as we said earlier, there are priorities, and where are the priorities, and that's what council deals with. That's what a department like Parks has to look at, and they do eventually. It might take a year or two, but that they're working together, and it's the partnership that I know that we try to encourage more and more and more.
So, we've just been through one of the biggest balancing acts you have to do, which is the annual budget.
Yeah.
This is where it comes down to oftentimes where are the resources going to go.
Yeah.
And some things win and some things lose over time. I'm talking to an old friend. When he started out in Parks and Rec, there was 100 park staff that were summer students
Yeah.
developing programming in the parks for the neighborhood kids.
Yeah.
We're down to 25.
Yeah.
Like, you kind of go, geez, that really lost out, and you can see how that could make a big difference,
Yeah.
and certainly in some neighborhoods, to keep the kids in a positive avenue rather than maybe ending up doing things we don't encourage. How do you make those decisions? How do you weigh those?
Well,
Do we fix the road, or do we provide support to the kids?
Yeah, you're right. That's the balancing act. And there's no question that all of us, and I mean all 13 of us on council, would do everything we can for the youth. But you're right, it becomes a balancing act. Well, things have changed, from when you and I were kids.
Yeah.
Okay, and we didn't have a like a community center like we have now. The pools have half them have disappeared.
Yeah.
Well, people are more mobile now. That's part of it. The parents will pile the kids into the car or pile them into the bus, and they'll drive to these places now that become central hubs for for not just kids but adults as well. So you say, okay, where do we spend our money? Should we spend our money on a central location like chapels, use for example?
Right.
And Parks has looked at a master plan for chapels. New soccer fields, new baseball diamonds, new tennis courts, all of these things where people can congregate. And you have to get there, and you may have to bike or walk or take a bus or whatever. But I think that's sort of the model that Parks is looking at now. I'll pick on Parks.
And we're pretty much out of time, Brian.
Already?
If people want to get a hold of you and find out more, what's the best way to do that?
Well, I have two, they're my city contacts. My phone number is 767-3945.
Okay.
And my email address is bmckinnon@thunderbay.ca.
Brian, thank you so much for coming on. We ran out of time. There's so much more to cover. I hope you'll come back.
It's up to you.
Please come back and join us again, and check us out on Facebook. Stay safe.